I'm Mike Kelly from Project Healing Waters in Omaha, and tonight is session 2 of a series on crappie flies, um, and more specifically, flies that are um, easy to use in shallow water and not end up on the hung up on the bottom. Flies that kind of neutrally buoyant, so they can be fished really slowly around spawning beds, and it's a really fun time to get crappie from the bank with a fly rod. Um, so the three fly, I'll show you a PowerPoint deal here that
Mike, you want to consider spotlighting yourself?
yep. Thank you, Al. I'll do that first. Okay, and then I will grab this and share it. So these, if we have time, these are the three flies I want to cover. The Grizzly King, Canadian Killer, and Dublin Special. The key to each of these flies is just like I said, they're hair wing flies or very light materials. They're not weighted at all. So when you fish them, they're easy to fish in about the maybe 1 to 3 feet of water. If you want to get them down to 6 feet or so, you have to give it a pretty long wait time for that fly to slowly sink down. And a lot of times they'll take it on that sink. But um, these are a lot of the style of flies that I like to use for that. They are pretty fancy. That's why I started tying them because I just enjoy some of the classic streamers and wet flies. But who wants to tie a bunch of pretty flies and then just put them in a box somewhere? I like to fish them too, and they are very effective. So we'll start off with the Grizzly King. That was invented by James Wilson in 1840. He was the brother of John Wilson, who created the well-known wet fly, the Professor. Similar patterns to this were used in Scotland long before the Grizzly King came into popularity, but this was his rendition. Now it's tied a couple of different ways. The one you can see in the picture there on the top is with squirrel tail, and that's how I'll tie it tonight. But here's another version that is pretty popular, and that uses mallard flank feathers for the wing. I'm still sharing, so you can't see it, right? There it is.
There you go.
That has mallard flank for a wing, and I do have a lot of luck with these flies that have mallard flank. To me, the barring in there kind of looks like scales. Maybe gives an indication of movement. And any kind of a fly that has red in it, especially some contrast, is usually pretty effective. So the materials on this, I'm just using a 3x long streamer hook. You can use a 4x long streamer hook and have it look a little. To me, they look a little more fancy when they have a longer body. But this is a real good size. In a size, this is a size 6. The tail, traditionally, a lot of these wet flies would use quill sections from dyed goose wing feathers or duck quills. But a lot of tyers use saddle hackle, so that's what I'm going to use for the tail. The body is a green floss, and I like this. This is I think they're calling it forest green. So I just like that's a richer color than a lot of the greens you can find in this floss. This is Danville's 4-strand floss. And on a fly this size, normally I'll take 2 strands, and I'll show you the procedure, and then use the other 2 for another fly. It has a little bit of flash to it with a rib, a silver rib, and then the beard is the mallard flank as well. So put a hook in the vise and get it a little more straight. I'm going to use 140 denier black. This is ultra thread. You could use any thread that's a little bit heavier. You want to build the head up a little bit when you're done, and especially if you're tying with anything like squirrel tail or some of those materials, you want to really tie it down tight. I'm going to start about an eye length back from the eye. And lay down a thread base. Back to about there. And then I'm going to take this saddle hackle and strip, just kind of get those barbs to where they're sticking out from the stem. And I'm going to grab a healthy clump, at least a half an inch. It's like I got about 3/4 of an inch there. Take those away from the stem, and then you can tap it with your finger like this to get those butts that are a little bit even there. Just loosen it in your finger and thumb, and then you can tap those butts. That gives me a pretty healthy tail. I want to go at least a half of a hook shank in length for the tail. Maybe a little bit longer if I can do it, which I can. These hackle barbs are long enough. I'm going to tie that down on top of the shank. Nice tight wraps until it's at the end of the hook shank, which is right here at the barb, if you let your thread hang down. Now, this is a good time to tie in the ribbing material. And for this size of a fly, this I don't know what the brand is, and I don't remember where I got this, but it's a narrow mylar tinsel. And on this, you can see it's gold as it's wound onto the spool. But if you, the other side is silver. It's normally sold as gold and silver. They have some colors where it's a copper color and blue. But for the most part, most of the material that's used is a silver and gold. So I'm going to take the gold side of the tinsel and face it towards me. I want the rib to be silver. So if you tie it down with the gold side facing you, as you wrap that around, it's going to fold over and you're going to have the silver side showing. So I'm going to wrap that down. Nice tight wraps, especially at the end of that, where those barbs were tied in, because I want that to be pretty smooth. So I went really tight there at the end just to make a smoother body there, smoother transition. Come back toward the front. And then I'm going to take that 4-strand floss. And since I tied that other one the other day, I've got 2 strands of it here. And I'm going to put those together. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to take my tinsel and move it out of the way on my material clip here. Well, that's not in the way. Okay. Now to get a nice smooth floss body, I can take these two strands here, tie them in toward the front of the hook, give it about 4 wraps there, and then I'll pull it through so I don't have to cut anything. To about there, and then I'm going to move that back toward the eye. Hook slip. Now I'll zoom out a little bit here. I'm going to take that floss and just stroke it like this to get, the floss is made up of a lot of real fine fibers like silk. And I want to get those all pretty well aligned. So as I'm wrapping this around, I just take my fingers and just stroke it down the length of that floss. So I've got the 2 strands there and they're staying pretty close together. And I'm just going to wrap that down toward the tail. Whoops. Lost control of it there. When I get to the back, I'm going to turn around and come back over this. So I'll cover over any gaps that might have formed when I lost control there. Just have to be careful around the hook point, because if you rake that floss too much with the hook point, it'll start to fray and you'll have a big mess. So now I'll reverse back in the other direction. You can see I did fray some of it, but that's coming out. Sometimes if your hands are too rough, sometimes that'll cause it to fray as well. I've got a pretty smooth floss body. And the neat thing, once you start tying these flies, you can kind of freestyle them with whatever colors you like, whatever colors you think would be maybe more visible in your water, or your favorite color or favorite team. You could do orange and blue for the Broncos. So there's the body. And I want to make sure that floss doesn't come loose. Now I'm going to take this ribbing material and I'm going to start, so you can see when I started wrapping it, the gold side went to the inside. So now I have a silver rib. So I'm going to wrap that forward with spaced wraps, usually about 6 or 7 is a good proportion. Wrap that toward the front. Now my thread's gotten flattened out, so I'm going to give it a good spin so it holds it down good. And then I'll clip that pencil out of the way. It might have a big enough piece for the next fly, but we'll see. So there's the body and the tail. The next material is probably best to be the throat or the beard. Now, I have a bag of mallard flank feathers. When you get them, when you buy them from a fly shop, They have all of the under fuzz. Here's a piece of used saddle hackle to show you what I'm talking about. At the base of each one of those mallard flank feathers was all of this fuzz, this marabou-like fluff at the bottom. And so I just sat down one day and took all those feathers and stripped all the fluff or trimmed them back. And so you've got some that are well shaped and some that are a little bit curved. That's a pretty well shaped one. So if I wanted to use that for something where I needed a good feather, I would use that. But I'll look through this bag and grab one that's maybe a little bit bent or misshapen. If I can't find one, I'll just give up and grab one. If they're a little bit uneven, one side to the other, or that's the kind of slide. This one's really kind of distorted and bent. You can still use that for the fibers for the beard. So I'm going to strip these out away from the stem, about 90 degrees. These are a little bit longer. Strip them out to where I have a nice clump there has even tips. They're almost 90 degrees from the stem. And I'll just grab those and cut them away from the stem. And then I'll just bunch those together like that. And then I'll kind of eyeball how I want that beard to be. There's one thing about this is a down eye hook here. If you're tying in a beard like this at the bottom, it's pretty hard to tie it in and then come back later and clip the excess out of there. So normally when I'm doing a beard like this, I'll eyeball it against my thumb here. And then I'll grab it, mark it with this thumb, come with a waist bend and cut those ends. So now I'm tying it down exactly at those butts. Give it a couple good wraps. Then I can let go. And that gave it a pretty good beard. And I'll tie the rest of those butts down good. And I'll come back to about there. So there's the beard and the body. Get my focus right here. There we go. Now, the one I showed you, the sample fly, I did a wing of mallard flank. Like I said, those are pretty nice, but another way this is tied is with gray squirrel tail. You could use, I was really amazed when let me see if I can find it. Here it is. When I started using badger a lot on different flies, this badger hair is a lot softer. It kind of flows a little bit, but the markings on the badger is almost identical to the markings on gray squirrel tail. Gray squirrel tail is stiffer, a little sturdier, and it does give a little bit of like a neutral buoyancy because it is a little bit stiff, where the badger is softer and will kind of let that hook sink a little bit faster. But I'm going to take some of the hairs from the side here and just hold them out. All this stuff down at the bottom. Actually, this isn't too bad right here for the length of the fly. Maybe I'll use that piece down there. Normally, I'll start cutting at the base and move up. But I think this is a pretty good clump here. So I'm going to use that stuff from the bottom and cut it right up against the tail. And what I end up with, those tips are pretty well aligned. But I'm going to grab about this last quarter to a third of it right here. and hold that tight with my fingertips, and then just pull out all the short fibers and the little under fur stuff. And throw that away. And then this is my clump that's left. So now all I have is the butts of those hairs. So they're not all evenly aligned, and I don't necessarily want that. I could stack this hair and make the tips perfect, but sometimes more of a natural flow there is a little, looks nice. I want the tail to be almost to the end of the tail there, so right about like that. So if I eyeball that, I want to cut a little bit off of those tips, and that'll also even them up some. Now, holding these real tight, I want to come down on top of the shank, but I also want to move it a little bit towards me. And then I'll take a wrap over it. And these are just kind of medium wraps. They're not real tight. And I don't want to start going real tight until I've made a few wraps, because those keep it in place and hopefully kept it from getting wrapped around to the backside. So pinching it real tight on top. I still haven't let go. Now when I let go, it's actually a little bit too far on my side. The fish don't care if it's perfect, but it's always good to practice being as good as you can at tying it. I should have checked before I did that many wraps. It wouldn't have been such a hassle to undo it. So I still have my butts of the hair aligned. I'm gonna wrap this back toward back of the head. I won't lean so far towards me this time as I did before. Give it a kind of a medium wrap there, a little tighter, and then come toward the eye. And then building up from the eye back toward the front, I'm just kind of making more of a ramp for the head there. I got those tied down. Pretty nice. They're still leaning a little bit towards me. But I'm going to let them go in this case, and I'll show you a little trick with that. Now that the head's complete, I'm going to whip finish. And then show you how to be a cheater when things don't go your way. So this is UV resin, and this is the best way to do my little cheat method. I'm going to put some UV resin on there and just kind of work it around the head. It'll give it a nice, shiny, hard head there. But I'm going to put a little bit at the base of that deer hair. And I'm going to grab my UV light, secure it, and I'm going to take that wing and just kind of prop it up like that. And then I'll apply the light. Now that propped the wing up a little bit, and it makes it a little nicer there. It does look nicer with it propped up a little bit like that. Now, of course, when it gets wet, this is going to slim down, and it's going to look like a real nice little minnow. Of course, there's no such thing as a green minnow with a red tail, but the colors are more for contrast and visibility in the water. Just something that's eye-catching. Well, that's a grizzly king. Any questions about that one? I'll grab that off,
That's a really nice fly, Mike. Thank
hang
you.
it up. And the next one is the Canadian killer. This one has a red fly. The one I had in that PowerPoint had a black eye. And another thing you can do, let me go back to that real quick, is a lot of these classic streamers, they would take a end of a pencil, like a dull pencil, and just dab a little bit of white paint, and then dab a little black eye in the center of it, and then put your coating over it. Head cement or this UV resin is real good to use for that too, to keep that from breaking off of there, just to give it a little bit of an eye to kind of give it a target. This Canadian killer has a black head. The one that I tied, let me stop sharing, the other day, again, we all make mistakes, but I didn't put the peacock butt on the end of this one, which kind of makes it look more like a classic salmon fly. Got some red bucktail underneath the wing, like as an underwing. And then this, although it looks like the mallard flank, this is teal. And teal is a lot more, see if I can fit a comparison on the screen there. Your mallard flank is a little bit duller, where the teal is real sharp, dark bars. It's a little harder to get when you buy it from Fly Shop. It's a little more expensive. But I think it looks cool, especially on this pattern. Hang that back up. And for this one, I'll start with some red thread. This is 70 denier, but I'll give it a go. Actually, I do have some spooled up, some bigger stuff. But we'll get started with the 70. Take that back toward the end. And then the tail on this one is yellow, but first, it has a tag, which I don't think I've done on this before. It has a gold tag. So I'll take the silver side facing us and make a few wraps over that. Pull it back. And I'll take my thread right to the end of the shank, or right there where it's hanging at the barb. Then I'm going to move forward a little bit here just to get it out of the way. Take some spaced wraps out here to the eye. Now I'm going to take my tinsel. With this thin tinsel, I'm going to take 5 wraps down this way. 2, 3, 4, 5. And then come back up. Just try to do touching turns. It's kind of hard to see where the ends of those are. Then I'll back my thread back off. Where I meet up with that tinsel. and take a nice tight wrap over there to hold it in place. Another one, maybe one more before I can cut that out of the way. Actually, I'm going to leave that there because I think that's long enough to use for my rib. So I will wrap it around to the back. And I'll fight with it to get it to be gold when I get to that point. So I've got that to where it's on the back side. And the reason for that is once I tie that tail in, if I have the tinsel on this side and I wrap over, it's going to want to take that tail and push it around. If I start with my rib on the back side, I'll come up around the bottom of the hook to start with, and I won't mess with the tail because I'll be coming forward. I hope that made sense. I'll show you when I get to that point. Move that out of the way. And I'll tie in my tail. Now you could use, if you really want to get fancy, you could use golden pheasant crest. Feathers. But this isn't for show. This is for crappie. I think it's still going to be cool looking like it is. So I'll take, again, about a 1/2 inch of that saddle hackle. Try to line these butts up. I'm losing some of it here. Line those butts up pretty good. And then I want my tail to stick out about that far. And those tips are uneven, so I'm going to be able to taper that down into the body as I wrap forward. So I want my tail to be about that long. Where I'll hold it in place. A couple wraps on top, make sure it's right. I could make it a little bit longer. And then I'll wrap right back to that tag right there. And then I'm just going to wrap this down. Okay. Just to secure it and move forward here. Because again, I still have that 70 denier thread.
Okay.
And I want to actually build a body. And it's going to take me a long time to get it to look right with 70 denier thread.
What are you doing? What are you doing? You're being weird.
I'm going to mute.
Yeah.
Who else is in there?
Hey, it's me.
Okay. Oh, we got it. Just so we don't have the background in the recording. So again, I wanted to make a body, really running out of red floss, as you can see here. So I'm saving that for, Royal Coachmans and fancy flies, that I want them to really look nice. This is a real heavy 210 denier, flat waxed nylon from Danville's. I'm going to start this at the front. And I'm going to pretend that's floss. And it actually makes a pretty good body. As I'm wrapping back, anytime you make wraps like that, you impart twist into your thread. So every once in a while, you just grab it and spin it counterclockwise as if you were looking down on it. There's a few wraps and I'll spin it. Wrap this to the back with as touching turns as I can. Every once in a while, spinning it to flatten out my thread. And then I'll come back to the back here and start working back forward. Another spin. Whoops, sorry. I think I have my camera closer than I normally do. I'm really having trouble bumping it tonight. I'll bring that up to about there. And I almost forgot my peacock curl again, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to spin my thread, make it nice and flat. Okay, I'm going to grab, if it's full enough, I'll grab one peacock curl. I'm just using strung peacock curl, just in the natural color. And I'm going to take the tip and break it off because they're brittle and they'll break on you anyway. And I want to tie this in. The stem, there's like a ugly side and a shinier side. The stem is over here on the ugly side. And if I do this right, I'm going to have that facing forward. And I want the butt to be about that long. So I'm going to come out here, get it out of my way. And actually, this is why you should follow a recipe and not just do it out of memory. I'm going to take my tinsel and move it out of the way because I don't want to wrap the tinsel through my butt. So the gold down here is the tag, and we have the tail, and now this is a butt. And I'm going to give it, now you see if that stem is forward, as you wrap this, that peacock curl is going to stand up real nice and you're not going to see any stems in it. You have a nice clean butt. It sounds really silly. So now I'm going to tie off this peacock curl. Maybe one more turn forward. Then I'm going to cut that out of the way. And then I'll take my thread, give it one more layer, spin it, make it flat toward the front. Then I'll take my rib, wrap over that, cut it loose. So now we have a tag, a tail, a butt, and the body with the rib. On this fly, the beard is brown. So I'm actually using a hen hackle, which is, if you can get hen hackle in the colors that you want to make your beards from. If you look at the barbules there, they're real webby and thick, hold a lot of color. when you look at a saddle hackle, a lot of those tips are sparse. They kind of more obvious. That red is actually pretty good for saddle hackle, real webby like that. If you have sparse tips like on this white, your beard isn't going to be as thick and dense. So again, I'll just stroke these out to where they're sticking out perpendicular. Grab about a 1/2 inch of them. Cap those ends to even it up. I'm actually not going to want to cut too much off, but I want to get some of that the curly stuff where I tore it away from the stem of the feather. I'm going to come back about to where I want the end of my head to be. Holding that real tight. Wrap around there and make a beard. Clean up the head a little bit. Okay. And then the wing on this again is the teal. So I'll grab a pretty symmetrical feather out of there. Now you can, if you have larger feathers, you could actually do kind of like we did for the beard. These are pretty long. So you can strip these off of here and make the wing kind of a rolled wing. Or you can keep it all together. You stroke those back together here. And just kind of roll it like that. Just kind of fold it. And see how that's going to cooperate. So that looks like it's a good, like an angle, I guess, for it to hang back. That looks pretty nice right there. So I'll eyeball that. I should have enough room to cut this at the front. So I'll tie that in with a few wraps and see how it looks. That rolled on me some. So if I do what's called a pinch wrap, I have the materials tight between my thumb and finger. I'm going to take the thread against my thumb and then come back down on the other side, and keeping that held tight, I'm going to pull straight down and do that one more time. And then hopefully that laid the way I wanted it to. Actually pretty good. And then take a few tight wraps, and then I'll cut this off and finish up the head. Give it a whip finish. We'll glue that head. If you use head cement, give it a coat, let it dry for a while, put another coat, and you'll kind of build up that shiny, glossy look. Again, not important to the fish, but It keeps it really sturdy. So you can use this through a lot of fish. And it looks nice. If a fly looks nice in the fly box, you're going to use it. You're going to be more likely to use it. If it looks a little wonky, then you're not going to have confidence in it and you're not going to fish it. As curved as that feather was, I probably would have been better off just stripping those barbules from the stem and using them as kind of a rolled wing. But still, I think that makes a pretty nice wing. That's the Canadian killer. I really haven't been able to find an origin. But the real striking pattern on the teal wing, again, to me implies scales and movement. And then just the contrast of red, yellow, and peacock really makes it visible in most water. It's a beautiful fly and it's fun to tie. And peacock and red are both very, very special colors. At least what I've found. There's the Canadian killer. How are we doing on time? Pretty good?
Yeah, I think we're okay, Mike. Let's see, what is it here? Yeah, we're good. That was a pretty fly.
Love it.
You're gonna convert me to streamer tying, I guess.
Oh, it's fun. I once I started doing it, I really started to really geek out on them. The history of them and reading about all the different styles. And a lot of these streamers are actually, of course, Ray Bergman did I believe it's called Trout, the book. It's several flies, wet flies. So it'd be on like a 2X long hook or even 1X. Wet flies that are shorter in stature. A lot of them had like a turkey wing or quill wings, some of them married wings. But a lot of the streamers that kind of evolved maybe in the 50s, 40s and 50s were actually adaptations of those fancy wet flies. So this one is the Dublin Special.
Al had to leave. He had to go to his Oregon group tonight, Mike, but
I
he
saw
said, great presentation. Love those flies. Tight lines, Al. So
Excellent. This is the Dublin Special. This one, I had that longer saddle hackle, white saddle hackle, so I used that. You could also use bucktail as this. It's a beard, but I guess you could call it an underbeard. And the intention was to have the red hackle show up to about right here. So there'd be more separation between the lengths of the beard there. With the one that I had from the interwebs, that's a pretty fancy embossed gold tinsel body there. But this actually on the stock trout and on crappie, I usually end up not having any more of those in my fly box by the end of the spring because I either lose them in trees or snags or whatever. So I started using them a lot. It's got the shine. It's got the mallard flank with the bars in it like that. A little bit of red. It's just for some reason, they like that. But like I said, if you looked at my streamer box, I've got maybe 4 of about 40 different patterns of these types of streamers. About 4 each of them. So usually by the time spring hits, I've got a pretty good variety in there. We're gonna go back to black thread. Um, this that's, looks pretty thin. That's that 12-aught Semper fly. I'm gonna go back to that bigger thread. I don't know if I said it or thought it, but I saw Paul is in and I saw Mick is in. So hello to both of you.
Hello.
And Will came in later, and David Hauser came in later.
Mick, how are things going down there?
Doing good.
Okay.
Yep, we're doing good. I just responded to your email, so far so good.
Okay, good. Prayers are out to you.
Did you get through all those storms okay?
Yeah, we were fine. That was
Okay.
real bad stuff was a little south of us, so we're good. I still have a house.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to take a mallard flank that's a little bit wonky. I want some good markings. Actually, I have a piece left from something else there. I'll use that for the tail, just as it is, I think. So since this has a little curve to it, I'm going to let that kind of curve up. About a little over half a hook shank in length. Tie that down on the top. That's about right. Maybe it could be a little bit longer. All that good. And then I'll just kind of use that as a little bit of an underbody. Make the body a little bit thicker. And then the body on this is, I'm going to use a wider tinsel. This is UTC's version, but just about everybody makes it. This is the large gold and silver mylar tinsel. You don't really have to tie this down all the way down the body. If you were really using anything thicker, you would want to do that so you didn't end up with a bump. But this mylar stuff is so thin, it's not going to matter. So again, the body on this is gold, so I want the silver side facing me. So I'm going to tie it in like that and let thread torque take that around to the back of the hook. And then I also want a rib. So I don't have it out. But it's a French tinsel, oval tinsel. It's basically really small mylar tinsel that's woven around a core. And I'm going to use that as a rib. So I'm going to tie that on, leaving a little bit long so I can tie that down the length of the body. Once I get that in at the base, I'm going to just start wrapping forward and hoping that I don't have too many lumps and bumps. It doesn't look like I do. I left a little bit long there. I'll cut that off. All my threads out of the way. Since I tied the silver side facing me, as I wrap this around, silver side goes to the inside. I have the gold on the outside, which is what I wanted. So I'll wrap these as touching turns as I can do here. You have a little bit of an overlap on a shorter shank, it's not going to be a big problem. On a longer shank, it would start to pull away toward the front. That up to the front, tie it off. Then I'm going to take the gold here, the oval, and I think I might reverse wrap. I will reverse wrap. So I'm coming across the wraps of that flat mylar. And that oval, for one thing, mylar could eventually probably start to come undone from a fish's tooth and start coming unwrapped. But so the rib will kind of keep that from happening. But also that rib sticking up like that, it's kind of gives it a extra facets to shine off of. So any light is going to catch, one of those surfaces. And then for the wing, well, let's do the throat first. Make sure I have plenty of thread up here at the head. And then I'll turn it upside down. I'm going to grab this white saddle hackle. And the one I used on that other fly, the tips were really broken and nasty. I didn't carefully select that feather. I'm actually going to go with about 1 inch because these tips are kind of sparse. And then I'm going to squeeze them together. And then just use my thumb to kind of stack those a little bit. I hold them loosely in my thumb and finger. I don't make too much of a mess of this. I'll try to stack them.
You're kind of off camera there, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
So that's a pretty good stack there. So I want this to be a little bit longer of a beard. So I want the ends to be about right there. I'll cut that over the waist bin and tie that in. Right here. So that goes back toward the hook point. Then I want some red. Let's see, I like that red that I had earlier, this one. Because the barbs are real webby and thick. So a small clump of it is going to look pretty nice. I'll take about a little under 1/2 inch there. And I want a shorter little beard or throat of red. About like that. So I eyeballed it, cut off the ends. Then I'll tie those in. And that looks pretty nice. Clean up the head a little bit. And then this time I'll actually strip some of this and do it kind of more of a rolled wing. So I'm going to take one side of this, spread all those out, strip those off, and then I'll set these down on my pedestal there where I can reach them, and come to the other side and strip all those off. Line up the butts as closely as I can. And then mix those two bunches together pretty good. This one needs to be a little bit longer. And then they're kind of going in different directions. So if you just kind of twist them.
Really can't see how you're twisting them, Mike.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, that was off the screen.
Thank you.
Basically just taking these, taking the bundle and just twisting it between my thumb and finger. It kind of starts getting them in different directions. And eventually you're going to end up kind of a little bit more married together in a clump, kind of like that. Then we want to go out almost to the end of the tail, like about like that. So I'll cut off here. Do a pinch wrap. Oops. My hook was loose. Do a pinch wrap. Come down. Whoops. Come up on this side, down on the other side. And hold them real tight. And there's your wing. Clean up the head a little bit. Looks like the front's a little small. I want to block that off a little bit. And then come back toward the back of the head there to get ready for the whip finish. Whoops. Do that again.
Yeah, that whip finish is something I have yet to figure out. I watched Mr. Flagler's video from Orvis, but yeah.
I'll put a little glue on it and then I'll try to.
Yeah, Bill, just come on up to the MVSC on the 20th, I think it is, of April, and we'll get you into it.
Yeah, we'll have all the tools and materials and everything there.
Actually, I'll be tying down at the casting competition on Saturday at the Vets Fish Free Day. So just stop by the table down there. Oh, you'll be down there, and we'll just either Mick or I will show you how to do a whip finish. We're both going to be tying.
There you go.
I'll see how things feel. It's been interesting.
And that's a Dublin special.
Very nice, Mike. Very nice.
I can definitely see how a rotary vise is very handy for doing beards.
Right. Beards for looking at the other side of your fly, inspecting it, taking a look at what the other side looks like. I don't so much use it you can use it to wrap materials, but sometimes that's just more trouble than after you've done it that way for so many years. But it is really a big benefit for.
I think that's it exactly, Mike. We've learned how to tie materials on it without the rotary feature. That it's for you and I and other brothers of our age, it's just more of a hassle than it is worth. But the younger generation really uses the heck out of that rotary feature.
Right. So I'm going to use this big. It's actually
Little out of focus.
it's actually silk, but it's heavy and it's bright. So hopefully that'll be a good zoom out as far as I can zoom. There's a fuzzy stuff on there. So I think part of the key with this is stopping it from spinning. Like if you're just holding it down here and then you try to place it on the thread, I mean, it's kind of going different directions. So I realized the other day that I actually hold it up here to kind of immobilize it, so it's not spinning. Then you can set it on your thread like this, where the hook grabs around the back of it. And then you've got this little notch on the loop at the bottom. And you just bring that up toward the hook. And then now you can start letting your tool start to turn around. So it would be clockwise, as if you were looking at the front of the hook. You come around clockwise like that. And if you want to look at it when you're beginning, to just always start with a triangle like this. Your thread, the end of your thread here is even with where you want to start your knot, right here at the base of my thumb there. And then you just kind of keep that triangle tight. And then as you come up, actually, I'm pulling back on this, but wrap around like that and keep coming forward over the front like that. And that just takes several wraps of thread over this tag end. So then when you pull on it, you pull that thread back through those wraps that you just did. And that's a super secure knot because it's wrapped over the top of those. You could do a whip finish with I think you've probably seen this, with a half hitch tool, where you do a half hitch and then you do 2 half hitches
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe 2 more. And that's almost as good as a half hitch, or I mean, as a whip finish. But for the whip finish, immobilize it so you can set it on there and have control.
Mm-hmm.
Pull your thread up and then make that triangle.
Oh, that's the piece I'm missing.
What's that?
Oh, that's the piece I'm missing. I hold it in my fingers because I was watching Tim's video.
Yeah,
But then I
hold it in
moved
your
too
fingers.
quickly into the rotary portion.
Then just let that hook grab it right there. Wrap it around here, and then just make a triangle like that and just keep coming back around. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Drop the knot.
Let go with the back bump back here and keep it in the hook. The last thing you want to do is have it end up in the hook right there. And then pull your slack out and you can use that to hold.